now they got this group chat, so they just hang on to whatever little tidbit they can.
You ready?
Yeah.
WDXE News, on the air since 1951. This is the legendary 95.3 WDXE.
That's us. It's time for Bulletproof Estate Planning with Stan Pierchoski. Is your headphones down? Turn the mics up.
Just a little bit.
Is that you? You get the right one?
I'm trying to follow the wire.
Is that it right there?
Well,
Check that, check that, check this.
It's this one.
Yeah, you should have some volume.
Well,
You got it?
yeah, I can hear, but yeah, much better. A little bit
Okay.
down just a hair. There you go. Good morning. Good morning. It is
All right.
Friday again.
Get the headphones fixed.
Missed you last week, and Miss Charlotte did it. And we did.
Yeah.
We went headphone-less.
Yeah, did you
There was
really?
none here, so we did.
Oh my goodness, what happened to them?
I don't know. We just did that way. It didn't seem to be. Wasn't even noticeable, really.
Okay,
Did not
well,
do
good
that.
deal. Well, good deal. I checked in on you.
Did you?
Yeah, I
Did you
checked
turn
it. I turned it on to check in on you.
Oh, then you didn't hear the part we were talking about, right?
No.
Well, she brought it up, not me.
She would. So how have you been? Been a whole 2 weeks.
It's been
since
2
I
weeks
saw
for
you.
you.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good. We, we had a death in the family 3 weeks ago, and so we're going through a lot of that.
Yeah.
On my wife's side, and so things are, getting back to normal.
Yeah.
We had some family visiting, and they've all headed back home and stuff like that. So trying that sort of thing. So, but other than that, I mean, been good. We had our seminar last Saturday at in Pulaski at the Legion, and practically a packed house. I mean, it was
awesome.
It was great. It was very good. A lot of good folks, inquisitive folks. Got a lot of people sign up to come and talk further about stuff on personal stuff and so very successful, and they usually are. But I mean, it was a very good crowd.
That's great.
And it was a great day. It was a wonderful weather day. And, I really am humbled by people that will come and sit through my seminar and ask questions on a beautiful Saturday morning.
Right.
When they could be doing a lot of other different things. So, I mean, those are the kind of folks that want to hear what their options are. And they want to hear, what they can do. And they want to get their affairs in order, and they want to take care of things.
Of course.
And so they, they'll do that on a Saturday. The Saturdays just seem to be popular.
Yeah.
To me, my Saturday and Sundays are like almost sacred. And when my wife plans something on the weekend, it's like, well, let's see where we're going to work it in, because I got so many things to do on the weekend, because that's the only time I get to do some of the stuff around the house. But it was just very humbling for people to take their time and come visit that. So anyway,
very good.
It was good. We talked about a bunch of cool stuff, and. So, I mean, as far, the next one that comes up, though, we do about every other month. So the next one that comes up now is in May. Now that one, it's May the 17th, which is Saturday again, and that's going to be here again.
Okay, here.
We were looking at, we usually go up to Franklin, up there.
Right.
Into Williamson County, and I think that's Williamson County. Anyway, we go up there, and the venue was under construction. They were revamping it or something. So I'm not sure. The reason we're back here again so soon, I think, is just some unavailability in other places. So, but we'll keep you posted. But we do about every other month.
Yeah.
So the next one's going to be here at WLX on Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning on May 17th. So
yeah, that's a good venue here too.
Yeah, we'll bring that up as in many Fridays to come, and keep you posted. And surprisingly, it's not too early to RSVP for that. We already have some. So
that's neat.
And that's typical, because a lot of folks that maybe at the last minute can't make like the last one.
Right.
We'll ask about the next one, and they'll go ahead and sign up for that.
That's good.
So
it happens.
It does, and so but we've already got people scheduled to come, and as we get closer, it becomes more. So
perfect.
And we got plenty of room here, and you even got a TV on the wall now. I may be able to just bring my laptop and plug into your TV.
That's
just
right.
Lugging that thing. I already broke one big screen TV by lugging it back and forth all the time. If you ever tweak them, they don't like that. And they don't they're not built to take a lot of tweaking.
Yeah, they don't, and they're kind of moody.
They are. And then once you get one of those weird spots on the screen, it just gets bigger and bigger over time, and it happens quick, and that's the end of it. So
yeah.
So what do we want to talk about today? I have something I wanted to bring up.
What do you got?
I'm going to talk about divorce.
Oh boy, this sounds fun.
Well, when I talk, you're going to say, well, what does divorce got to do with estate planning? Well, stay with me, and we'll get there. I will dovetail the two together.
It's amazing how this affects everything, just about.
So, we talk about divorce. You know, most people, a lot of people have been through divorce. A lot of people who haven't been through a divorce know people that got divorced. And, you know, I think everybody has pretty much been exposed to it, directly or indirectly, or some way. Okay.
Sure.
And I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but just you know, there's only two things that people argue about in the divorce court. And I know that because I used to do divorce, but I never did much work. I never did any contested divorces.
Right.
Because I don't know, I just never liked that kind of
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
And but the only thing people would fight about are children, which I'm not going to talk about. You know, custody,
Right.
or property. You know, how to divide the property, which is what I am going to talk about. Now, when you get a divorce, and let me back up a little bit. You know, in law, and I've probably mentioned it many times, there's two kinds of property. There's real property, which is land,
Right.
and everything attached to it.
That's right.
And then there's everything else, which is personal property. Okay. I mean, every piece of property on planet Earth falls in those two categories. So if you read a will, or if you read something, it always talks about all my property, both real and personal, and sometimes you see the language and mixed.
Mm-hmm.
But real property, personal property are the only types of property there are.
Yeah.
But it is subdivided when you get into divorce court. Now there's two kinds of property that the court deals with, and that's marital property and separate property. So now we're not delineating it by the kind of property it is. You know, real and personal is, you know, real is land versus stuff you own by possession.
You said marital and what?
Separate.
Separate. Okay.
Now we're delineating the two kind of property by how they're owned. Okay.
Okay.
Not what they are. So marital property could be real property and personal property, and so could separate property. Could be. So we're kind of categorizing a little bit different, but that's what the court wants to deal with. Now, we are not a community property state where everything's 50-50. But if we're talking about a long-term marriage, in Tennessee, a long-term marriage is like 9 or 10 years or more.
Okay.
If you have a long-term marriage, it's pretty much going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50-50, unless there's a reason the court finds to not do it like that. But the statute uses this language. The language in the statute says that the parties are entitled to an equitable division of marital property. So, the jurisdiction of the divorce court is only over marital property. It has no jurisdiction to divide separate property. Okay? So, whenever you talk and get into a divorce, you know, the first thing they want to do is figure out what property the couple has and how they have it. What category does it fall into, marital or separate? Now, most people, like you and me, have been married for a long time. Everything's pretty much joint. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, you may have something separate, but it's not. It's kind of unusual to do so.
Sure.
But you know, we're going to figure that out because whatever it is, we're going to divide the marital property.
Yes.
The court decides how that division is, and the statute says equitable, which, like I said, for long-term marriage is pretty much down the middle. But anyway,
Yeah.
so let's talk about separate marital property and marital property because it's very unique. It's one of the few areas of law where a piece of property can change categories without you doing anything to make it so. Well, let me put it this way. You do something, but you don't like do a new deed or anything.
Right.
So let's take an example of a home. Let's say a couple is getting married, and let me just use myself as an example. I'm getting married, rewind 37 years.
Yes.
I'm getting married. Let's just say I have a house that I bought when I was single and I paid for it.
Okay.
No mortgage. I mean, the mortgage has nothing to do with it, but the deed is in my name.
Okay.
I own this house, just myself, Stan, right?
Right.
The deed says estate plan Stan, right?
That's right. That's what it
So,
says.
and I own it. And so I get married. Okay, we go to the church, we get married. Now, that is separate property by definition, because it belongs to me only. There's no co-owner, so it's separate property.
Yeah.
Now, suppose after I get married, my wife moves into that house, and that's our home, and she's a stay-at-home mom and wife, and she takes care of the kids, and she does what she does the laundry, and I go to work, and we mow the grass, and we clean the gutters, and we paint the house, and we do all the stuff that people do.
Right.
If we get a divorce somewhere down the line, you know, now the court is going to look at that, and they're going to look at what the house was used for.
Yes.
And they're going to say, this was separate property, but by virtue of how you used it, in other words, as the marital home, it has now been converted from separate property to marital property solely by how it was used. The deed is still in my name.
Yes.
Okay, so the court now has jurisdiction to divide that, because what they're saying is, my wife has gained an equitable interest in that home simply by what she has done in her contributions to the marital unit.
Yeah.
And that's the way the statute's supposed to work. So, if that's the case, so it can change just by using it. The same thing with marital property switching to separate property. You don't see that very often, but it could be. But we often see a lot of separate property get changed to marital property.
Okay.
And same thing with money. Let's say I won the lottery. I bought the ticket, and I won the lottery. Technically, the money's mine, whether I'm married or not, right? The moment I get it, it's my money.
Right.
But if I go stick it in the joint bank account, and we pay the mortgage with that, and we pay the light bill, and
Right.
we pay for the kids' food, and I would have instantly commingled those assets by putting it into a joint account. Now, if we got divorced, it would be divided.
Yeah.
And we're changing the posture of the property by how we're using it, just our use of it.
Okay.
If you use it for a marital purpose, it becomes marital property.
Interesting.
So then there's other factors like, excuse me, other factors like how long you've been married and stuff like that. But that's what can happen. Now, if that can happen, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and bring this into the estate planning world. And a lot of times people ask me all the time. They say, if I leave property to my son, is his wife going to get any of it? Or they're going to say, what if I leave property to my son and they get divorced? Is she going to get any of it?
Yeah.
And I talk about it at my seminars, and I talk a lot of time at my family vision meetings with people about divorce-proofing property. It is a way to divorce-proof it. Now, that little divorce law 101 that I just gave you is going to be helpful in understanding how we can divorce-proof something.
Okay.
So, how would it be done? If you leave an inheritance to a child, the goal would be to make it and keep it separate property. Because we know if it's separate property, it's not going to be divided because it's not even within the jurisdiction of the court to divide separate property.
Okay.
The only thing the court could really do is come to the determination as to what kind of property it is. So, how do you leave your inheritance to your child as separate property and keep it separate property? Okay, well, the first one's easy, that's done for us. An inheritance, by definition, the moment you get it, it is by definition separate property. So if I say I leave my son this property, this money or this land, and the moment he gets it, it's his. I gave it to him because it's not been used for marital purpose. Right?
Okay.
It's separate property. It's his.
Okay.
The big question is, what's my son going to do with it after he gets it? If he doesn't keep an eye on it and keep it separate, it's at risk to be commingled. Okay. So we usually don't want to rely on them to do that because without teaching them the divorce law 101 that we just went through, they wouldn't know that commingling it would be a problem. And it can be a problem in a marriage. Okay, suppose you inherit this money and it's like, okay, this is all mine. And it's going to create a little bit of friction between husband and wife. It's like, what do you mean it's all yours? We're a married couple. It should be toward our family and our collective well-being and stuff like that. And I get that. So you don't want to, so that's how it happens. But so what we can do is we can leave it to our children, but we can leave it in a format where it is always separate property. But we also want to go another step further and we want to let the child that we're leaving it to have the ability to access it anytime they want.
Right.
If they suppose they want to commingle. So we leave it to them in trust. All right. You have a trust, and your property's in trust, and you say in this trust, when I leave this property to my son, I want to leave it to him in trust, and I want to let him be the sole trustee of this trust. Okay. Now, when you leave it to him in trust, it is technically property that's in trust for his benefit. Okay. Now he's the sole trustee of it, so if he ever wants to take anything out of it, he can go take it out and give it to himself. But think of it this way, while it's in the trust, it's not technically his. It's not his until he takes it out as the trustee and gives it to himself, the beneficiary.
Okay.
And then it's his. So it's always protected when it's in this trust format. And if the court wants to say, okay, what property do you have? Well, I have a bunch of property over here in trust for my benefit.
Right.
They have to come to the conclusion that is separate property. It's actually not even his property yet at all.
Yes.
And so
it's in the trust.
it escapes the jurisdiction of the divorce court as marital property.
Interesting.
Now let's think about, we want to give him the best of all worlds. So let's just say I give my son the sole trusteeship of his own money. And let's say he's married, okay, and they need a new car.
Yeah.
So they take $20,000 out of their account to buy a new car, if you can get a new car for $20,000. A new one to them, okay?
Yes.
And so they buy this new car. Now the new car becomes they need it, so it ends up being the marital car, right?
Right.
And they use it, and they're both driving kids around, on and on. Now they have commingled that asset, but only to the extent of what they withdrew from the trust. The corpus of the trust, or the principal, still remains protected.
Right.
So they have the best of both worlds. It is protected, you know, and just, you know, for my son, it's also protected from lawsuits and creditors for the exact same reason. So
Oh,
we're
wow,
talking
okay.
about divorce proofing.
Right.
So it's protected as long as he leaves it in there. But if he needs to take anything out for any reason, he can just take it out. So he has the best of all worlds, and we can even go one step further, and that is this: if he can take it out and give it to himself, when you do that, it now becomes exposed, right, to a lawsuit or a creditor, or even to potentially to the divorce, right?
Okay.
So if he sees a divorce looming on the horizon, or you know things are starting to go south in the marriage and it just doesn't look good, or the divorce actually starts, or you just think it's going to start, well, you can control when you take property out of that trust and give it to yourself.
Right.
So if you got something coming down the pipe, just don't take anything out of it. Just don't expose anything, and we can pretty much. I mean, now all that's how we do it. Okay. Now you might say that sounds great. That's all. It sounds like a lot of theory. Sounds great. Well, I've actually seen it in practice, and actually I've seen it here recently.
Okay.
One of the trusts I did some years ago, it's out in Murray County, and one of the children who inherited like that went through a divorce, and I'd been talking to him about the certain things, and I was sort of keeping tabs on the divorce, the
Right.
proceedings,
Right.
and that's exactly what our circuit court ruled up there with the money he had, because he had a substantial amount of money in this trust, and of course when you get divorced, her divorce attorney, you know, was salivating on to get at this, and it was a contested issue, and they had a hearing on just that, the status of that property, and the the court ruled that was definitely separate property, and we're not going to divide that because it's not ours to divide.
Wow.
And so it works. You know, it's a great idea. It works. And people ask that a lot, so I thought I'd spend some time on that because I get the question. Of course, the question I get is not how to divorce proof it. The question I always get is like, hey, if I leave property to my kid, is their spouse going to get it, or are they going to get it after they divorce? Or sometimes people will say, my son's been divorced for 5 years. If I leave him anything, is his ex-wife going to have some kind of claim or something? And,
Yeah.
and of course, there's no vehicle that would get an ex-spouse any access to anything. You know,
Right.
You know, there's no hope with that. So don't worry about that one. But the other two are worth considering.
Yes.
So if you want to divorce proof it, which is a popular request,
Yeah.
then that's the nuts and bolts on how we do it. We just leave it to them in trust, and if we're not worried about, we educate them a little bit and let them know, hey, when you take property out of this, it's no longer protected. But if you need it, you can take it out. And so we set them up. If we want to tighten it up a little bit, you can. Suppose you leave it. Let's put it this way. Let's say you have a child, and this happens. I think a lot of people experience this. Let's say you have a daughter, and she's married, and you want to leave it to her this way in trust, and you want to let her be the sole trustee or to get it whenever she wants.
Right.
But she has a very dominant spouse, and she's very influenced by the spouse.
Yes.
In other words, the spouse could say, you know, you have all that money in that trust. You need to take some of that out of there and give it to me, or help my business.
Right.
I'm in debt, or something like that. You know, just use your imagination. And now you think of your daughter. She's kind of in a rock, in a hard spot. She knows the property was left to her to
Right.
protect it from that.
Right.
But she's got a spouse that's constantly gnawing in her ear about, give me some money, give me some money.
Yeah, want to buy something.
Now she may want to she has an interest in keeping the marriage from being a problem.
Sure.
So she may fold and do what the deceased person that left the property to him didn't want to have happen. So if you think you got something like that, we can tighten the trusteeship up, make it somebody else.
Really?
Oh yeah, we make this the beneficiary the trustee if we're not worried about that.
Yeah.
But if we are worried about that, how about we make the trustee somebody else? Or make that child a co-trustee with somebody else. It requires both of them. Now we have a little more check and balance on how the money's going to come out of there.
Right.
So when it says, you know, let's say the daughter is co-trustee with another child,
Yeah.
and takes both of them to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And the one co-trustee goes to the other and says, I want to take some money out of the trust, and the other one says, what for? He says, well, you know, my husband's got this business and he suffered some debt and I want to help him pay it off. And
Right.
the other one say, you know, that's not what Dad left it to you for. You know, maybe we can do something else, but we need to think this one through because that's not exactly what he wants your inheritance to be for.
Right.
And so if they don't agree, they can't take it out.
Yeah.
But if it's something else, and say, you know, our car got totaled. We need a new family car. We just got to have one. Well, okay, that's something a little more likely. So we can tighten that trusteeship up to help that person. Now, what we've at least done is if they can't get the money out to give the husband, I mean, he can't get mad at the wife because it's the other one that's vetoing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of family dynamics that come into the thought process on this, because that's a real thing. What I just told you, that being influenced by a spouse,
Yeah.
that is a real thing. Because,
Yes.
and it's a tough position to put that child in, because now
Yeah, it
they're,
is.
one hand they're worried about keeping their marriage going well, and not just saying, screw you, it's my money.
Yeah.
That's gonna cause hard feelings, right? There's no good way to say that.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's like, well, I want to honor Dad's memory because that's what he wanted. He wanted it to be mine.
Sure.
And now it's a rock and a hard spot. How do you make that decision? So if you have somebody that influences a spouse or kind of dominates their thought process,
Yeah.
we can still tighten that up a little bit.
Interesting thinking.
Yeah. So it's
Very interesting.
and it works well. Now, it doesn't make them happy. I mean, the spouse is going to be a little ticked, but they can't get at it. But
Yeah.
we knew that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And we want to protect it. We want to protect it for our children. And if it ruffles somebody's feathers, well, I mean, they'll just have to live with it. I mean, they just have to deal with it. Because then their feathers needed ruffling because they're trying to get at something that's not yours anyway.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a rotten thing to do, is to pressure your spouse to give, some of their inheritance to you. But I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
So there's all kind of things. So whenever, like, people that come to my seminar last week, and quite a few of them signed up for what we call a family vision meeting, which is a 2-hour-long meeting. This kind of stuff we'll get into. We'll see if there's any issues like that in the family dynamics.
That's got to be hard, Stan.
And we'll pitch a few options as to, well, how worried are we about this, and how worried, if some people say, I'm really worried about this, I know he's going to do that. Well, then we'll put in protective measures. And if some people say, no, it's not that big a deal, then we won't. But we won't know until we sit and talk about it.
Interesting.
So what's going to be hard?
I would just say that's you would have to engage in sometimes maybe difficult or hard conversations.
Well, usually they're brought up to me. People bring to me and say, listen, I got 3 kids, and let me talk about this one.
Yeah.
Because there's some real issues here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they are difficult conversations, but people usually are okay talking about it.
Yeah.
Because their concern is...
Well, they've come to you to deal with it.
That's right. It's part of what they're there for.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes people, sometimes they'll break down and get a little teary-eyed because it's usually not an ideal situation.
Right.
And
right.
it's sad, or it's insulting to them, or you'd be surprised how many people have a child that just kind of estranged them, and it's hurtful to the parents. I mean,
Sure.
Now I'm not talking to the child, so it's maybe hurtful to them too. But one comes to mind recently that the spouse was pretty much instrumental in pulling the child away from the family and becoming more closer to the spouse's family, and just totally estranged for years and years. And that's very painful to the parents. And now they're not too crazy about leaving that person or anything.
Yeah.
But it's painful to them to talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And if you have a child that's got a drug problem, I mean, you definitely want to protect that child from himself, right?
Yeah.
But it's
It's
painful to talk about.
Yeah.
Because they have this problem, and if you have this problem, as far as the problem is concerned, there's very little you can do. I mean, you can, how do you help somebody unless they want to be helped?
That's true.
You say, listen, if you're in a rehab, I'll pay for it. Great, but you got to have a person want to go to rehab, right? That sort of thing. So you can, and we do the same way if we want to protect it from an addiction like that. We put it in trust, but we really don't make that person the trustee over it. We definitely do somebody else.
I've used the expression a lot of times that families are complicated.
Yep.
They can be very complicated. And you're dealing with relationships, love, even in hard circumstance, all that kind of stuff. Emotions can get high.
There's a series on Netflix. It's called Outlander.
Outlander.
Have you ever seen it?
I've seen it advertised, but I've not seen it.
Yeah, we've been watching it, and you talk about a family being a hot mess. I mean, of course, this takes place 200 years ago and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But between the people just being a hot mess and everybody and their brother ends up, all the women seem to get raped at one time
Oh,
or
my
another.
goodness.
It's just, it's really, or whatever, and all the people that enter in are just low lives, and it goes from bad to worse. You talk
bad to worse.
You talk about families with problems. It all circles around this one group.
Yeah.
And their family ties, and it's just something.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, we watch TV shows for entertainment, and of course they're a lot of times based on, they're written by people, and people have their experiences and what have you. But we were laughing the other day about back in and I guess they're still on, some of them anyway, the stories, as my grandmother used to call them, the daytime drama stories like Days of Our Lives or this, that, and the other. And I was laughing.
yeah.
We were laughing about that the other day. But it was one summer when I was a teenager that I actually got into watching Days of Our Lives, and I remember, I think it was my aunt, my great aunt. We were watching one episode, and she put her hand on her mouth and she said, "So true to life, so true to life."
Yeah.
So anyway, we're entertained by life, I guess.
You know, back in the late '80s, early '90s, when I was building my house,
Yeah.
I was in a little house.
Yeah.
Like it's about 350 feet away from where I was building. Would go there to eat lunch. You know, because I was a one-man show for about 5 years building
Yeah.
the house. I retired to private life and just did that, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't get the satellite dish yet. That was back when you had this great big 10-foot satellite.
Oh yeah, those great big dish.
And I had one I was going to get, but didn't get it yet. And I'd go eat lunch, we'd turn the TV on, we only got one channel.
Yeah.
And it was grainy at that.
Yeah.
But it was watchable. And every day at lunch, what was on was The Bold and the Beautiful.
The Bold and the Beautiful.
Although I wouldn't say I got hooked on it, but I did kind of develop an interest in it.
Yeah.
But you know, some of the interest was I'd like to be entertained, and some of it was kind of laughable. You
Yeah.
know, but it was fun. It was kind of
Fun to watch. Yeah.
because the people, the screwy situations they get themselves into was entertaining. But yeah.
Yep.
But what is so true to life is screwy situations that people end up in.
Yeah.
It's just some of the stuff you just can't see coming. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't make it up if you wanted.
Well, I've encountered both. You know, we've talked about estates and estate planning, and I have estate sales. I've encountered those, and then and I've actually had to liquidate property because of divorce.
Yep.
And it's a sad deal. It's a sad deal.
I've had, you know, back when I did criminal defense work, every now, you know, one case in particular that I had to deal with, both husband and wife were imprisoned
Oh my!
because of things done with the child. And we had a house and we had all this stuff, and I didn't really get involved with, but I facilitated auctioning off property and stuff like that
Yeah.
because they had a lot of expenses to deal with and fines, and it was just unpleasant, but a mess, just a hot mess.
Having to deal with what you have to deal with.
So, you know, people that come in and say, you know, my family's pristine, my kids are great, they're all financially responsible, everybody's lily white. It's like, all I can say is, God bless you, you're the only one. good for you.
Like Lake Wobegon kids.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
All the women are handsome,
Yeah.
the men are strong, and the kids are above average. So there you go.
But so, I mean, if you have a family and you got some issues like that, don't feel bad. I mean, it's absolutely about as common as it can be. We all do. But the problems, you know, when it comes to the estate planning, we can fix a lot of those, or we can at least mitigate
Yeah.
any issues we're worried about.
Yeah, and that's a whole point of this program is to direct people to in a place at your place actually where you can ahead of time address possible future pitfalls for you and your property,
yeah.
all those kind of things that need to be thought about, and you have a systematic way of doing that.
Yeah. And I have actually had people come in and tell me that they were going to leave nothing to a child, and I would inquire, you know, why? Not because I'm nosy, but because depending on the why, it might be different language that we want to use in the instrument. And if the answer was, well, because they've got a drug addiction and I don't want them to kill themselves with money I give them.
Right.
And then that opens the door. So well, let's talk about some actual options. It doesn't have to be feast or famine. I mean, in other words, if you leave it to them, you're worried they're going to kill themselves, and you'll be the instrument of their destruction, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want that. But the alternative, just don't leave them anything at all, may not be what you want either. You may think that if I just don't leave them anything, then they can't do that.
Right.
But you still have a desire to help the child if the opportunity to help appears. And help for that requires money.
Right.
And usually the people that need that help don't have that money. Because if they had money, they spend it on the addiction. I mean, I'm not bashing those folks. When I did criminal defense work, a lot of the stuff you do in criminal defense work are drug crimes. And those addictions are real. I mean,
Right.
how you get into it may be something you can bash, but once you have an addiction, it is a real problem.
It is a real problem.
You know, it's not like people say, well, you know, just quit.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you're not.
It's not that
easy. I'm not defending it in any way, shape, or form, but I'm telling you, it is those addictions are actual diseases, and those people just cannot help themselves when they do stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so, if they would have had any money, they would have spent it on that. So, if they do want to get to a position of rehabilitating,
Right.
I don't know, no place does it for free that I know of. And if you get it for free, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And it's just you can't run a place like that and be effective if you don't have operating capital, because certain things need to be done when people being rehabilitated. Just simply watching them so they don't go running off and doing something.
Yeah.
So it's gonna need, and if a child wanted to do that, a parent of that child would most assuredly want their money to be used for that.
Yeah, right.
But if you disinherit them, they don't even have that. So there's an option. We can put this money in trust to protect it. Now, we can make sure it's not used for the drug-related issue. But suppose the child hits rock bottom, like, well, things happen, and they decide they are gonna go to rehabilitation.
That's easier for you to say.
Yeah, and take it seriously.
Yes,
Well, if you can overcome the obstacle of the cost for them,
right.
that helps them. I mean, listen, in my opinion, I can think of no other result than that being helpful.
Sure.
And so that's what we want to do. And there's other options. And so many people feel like they can't do it. I had somebody once say, "I'm not leaving anything to my son because I don't want his gold digging wife to get it."
Oh,
Now we're penalizing the son because of who he's married to. Now, that whole discussion I had earlier, there's a solution to that problem. That's pretty straightforward.
Right.
So they just don't know what it is. These options. These are what I call the options.
yeah.
Some folks tell me, "I want to write a will." And I say, "Great, you want to talk about some other options?" And it's like, I didn't know there were any other options. I thought will was all I could do.
Yeah,
And that's a common thought.
it is.
There are other things you can do and other things, and so when you get into the will, if you want to solve some of these problems I'm talking about, you can't do it with a will.
Yeah,
The will has a beginning and it has an end. I mean, the probate system has a beginning and an end. You can't,
Right.
With a trust, you can keep this thing open and control these funds for as long as you want.
right. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we have a standard against perpetuity, but I mean, we're not talking that kind of time length.
Right.
We're talking about years or a decade or two even.
Right,
It's not.
right.
We can do that. Those all of options that are available. Depends on the problem we're trying to fix.
I think a lot of us tend to think that our circumstance may be, the only one like it, or, we think, well, I'm facing something that nobody can fix. And there's usually a solution if it's talked out. I'm talking about a legal type solution in this arena. There's usually a way to address the problems that they're facing.
Yep. I mean, in my opinion, there's always a solution. At some point in time, the solution may not be as ideal as it could have been.
Yeah.
Had certain things not occurred, but there's always something that can be done.
Right.
We can always mitigate. I mean, that at least makes the bad effect lessened.
Yes, absolutely.
Coming in, I couldn't get to pick up the station clear enough. And when I finally could hear it, you were talking about the word of the day, but you didn't say the word of the day. But I'm going to guess the word was derelict.
Derelict.
Okay.
Derelict. Yeah, we
I recognize it by its definition.
we were not going to be derelict in our duties.
Yep.
Yes.
Dereliction of duties. That's right. Yep.
Yes.
That is often a legal term as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
When I was a kid, we used to call people derelicts. It was like a name you call them. You derelict.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we knew what it meant, but that's what we called them.
Well, it might have applied whether we knew it or not.
That's right. I'm sure it did.
That's right.
Okay, so that was so when I first started, you're thinking, "Gee, Stan, why are you here talking about divorce?" Well, there you have it. It is a common concern that people have. So, hey, we forgot to tell folks to call in if they want to.
Yes.
Why we always forget that.
We do. 766-9393 is the number if you want to talk to Stan while he's here. We welcome those phone calls. 766-9393 is the number. And we certainly welcome your phone calls and questions. And if you got concerns or something like that you want to discuss, Stan will try to do it.
I think somebody called last week and Charlotte just about answered the question for me.
Well, how did Charlotte do in my absence, by the way?
She did good. She's a little different.
I had someone call and say they liked it. So,
yeah, she does things that are just a little bit different, but it was a good show.
Yeah, very good.
I can't remember what we talked about, but we did talk
well, we
about
can
something.
count on Peggy for a question or two.
Okay,
All
sure.
right. Hey, Miss Peggy, how are you?
Yes, I didn't have time to cover something last week that I thought Charlotte asked me a good question. And it brought up two different age groups, actually more than two age groups. She was saying, well, how, if you're 50 years old, do you start dealing with your parents? And I was just going to throw this out. You can have almost a perfect situation, but if you don't discuss with the person that's the power of attorney what's going on, you're going to have issues later. And the reason I say that is, and this is not a criticism, but I think the church teaches leave and flee. A lot of them are big on that. That does not mean you move away. It also means honor your father and mother, not your mother-in-law and your father-in-law, but your mother and father. And I think that a lot of older people don't tell their children. A lot of it is because they don't want them to would be everybody, that we didn't have any major problems over it, but some didn't know the last minute what was even set up. But I have a question about this. I know you can get more than one legal death certificate. Would he recommend the children having not just a copy, but one of the things you'll find at the last minute, if the person in charge doesn't check on things, is they change things, they initial things, policies or stuff, and if nobody as a group, so I think the person that set up is the power of attorney, and it's one person, should make sure the other people knew what's going on in case something happened to them. That's just one thing, and that's all I'm gonna say today.
What was that phrase?
My question is, how would he recommend, you know, I think if we, and the reason we had issues is we had major issues in all three of the children's families at the same time. And that's what happens with a lot of people. It's not like just the one person you're dealing with, it's major issues. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure,
Well, the question has to do with, how did you keep up with whether, for example, when we put our mother in the assisted living and then the nursing home, we didn't learn until then, and this is not a criticism of my brother, by the way, that we were both trying to deal with this, but neither one of us realized that she'd gone in there and changed some things, so it had validated the end of life things, and things like that took a lot of clerical time, and the question she asked at the end of the program is, how could a 50-year-old start getting ready to deal with their elderly parents where there's open communication? Does that make sense?
okay, all right.
What was that term before? Leave and cleave?
I'll explain
Okay,
that.
all right.
I'll explain that. I know what she's talking about.
Okay.
It's you know the biblical verse where a man shall leave his father and
Right.
mother and cleave to his wife.
I got you.
So that's what she was referring to.
That's what I thought, but I didn't hear exactly what it was. It sounded like that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Well, there's a lot in that, but I mean, if we distill it down to the question that Charlotte brought up, you know, if you're 50 years old and you've got your parents,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
now 80, I guess, or
Yeah.
roughly, and you want to deal with that, okay? I mean, how do you deal with them? I mean, assuming they're willing to discuss it. You know, I get people that say my parents just won't even talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to get a power of attorney for them, and they just refuse because they think I'm going to spend their money or something.
Right.
I'm not sure how to overcome that obstacle. I mean, that's just a personal communication thing. That sometimes when people they bring them in to talk to me, I can sort of break through that barrier by explaining to them that if you don't have that, you don't have somebody making decisions for you, and you want somebody trusted making those decisions for you. Because if not, they got to go to court to get a conservatorship, and it's up to the court to pick somebody. So you want the court to pick somebody that's not a family member
Right.
to make decisions for you. That's usually not desirable to most people.
Right.
And usually and there's more to it, but usually that will get their thought process and like, okay, I do need one of these. Now, how do I make sure that whoever I give the power to doesn't spend all my money? And I talk about the fiduciary relationship and stuff, and what the fiduciary duty and what that means. So that you need to get them talking first.
Yeah.
When you get them talking, I think she's right. I mean, when you fill out any documents, you know, end of life documents, which
Yeah.
is the quality of life, or the documents that distribute property and stuff. I think it's an advantage to sit and discuss it with your family, what you have in mind. For
Right.
a couple of reasons. One, they know what you want. You know, because let's face it, if something happens and you pass away and you have not done any of this stuff, at least they have an idea of what it is you wanted. Because nobody wants to be in a position to make a bunch of decisions and not know if they're making the right one or not, because you never clued them in on how you felt about anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
get this, I mean, I don't know if you've run into this, but I've seen people just struggle dealing with whether they should cremate or bury a recently deceased person. They just don't know what to do, and they're so afraid that if they pick the wrong thing, that they'll hate themselves for the rest of their lives. And they'll never know if they picked the right thing or the wrong thing, because they never discussed it with them, you know? So
Right.
that's like a torment to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, so, you know, it doesn't hurt a bit to discuss these things and let people know. Now,
Right.
once you do know what they want, then you want to convince them to memorialize it into some enforceable document.
Right.
Now, a lot of people are old school and they say, well, I just want to let them know and I trust them to do it. Well, it's not a trust issue of them to do it, because they may want to do it 100%. They may not
Right.
have the authority to do it. If you don't have the authority to do it, you can't get it done, whether you're following, you know, the person's wishes to a T or not.
Right.
So I agree, it's very helpful to discuss it with them so your children know what you want.
Yes.
And I guess just ask them. I mean, I can't imagine anybody something so opposed to talking about it that they absolutely wouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, you guys have stuff. What, do you have a thought process for where if there's anything left when you pass away, where would it go?
Yeah.
Who do you want to have it? How do you want to have it? I mean, a lot of times during holiday season, a lot of families get together because most people have people, that move off somewhere else, right? And they don't live local anymore. But they get together at the holidays, and that's a really good time to bring that topic up.
Right.
Now, I know some people find it very unpleasant, and I say, I don't want to talk about this. Well, you just need to wear them down a little bit and say, look, we're not, I know it's a little unpleasant, but it's kind of a necessary thing. And usually, usually gets a lot of people in gear is something happens in the community. It's somewhat of a negative story or a horror story about everything going south, and it just went from bad to worse because of doing nothing.
Right.
Now, that will get a fire under some people sometimes
Sure.
to do stuff. Or even the opposite sometimes. If something happens, it's kind of a success story.
Yeah.
They had planning and everything went very smoothly.
Exactly.
That also can be a motivator. But I think unfortunately, the negative stories are the one to get everybody's attention. And so, communicating with them is definitely important. And I encourage the communicating. Don't keep procrastinating that topic. Discuss it. Then you might want to tell them, look, if this is what you really want, and let's just say you break through that and you finally say, here's what I would really like to have happen, and they explain it to you. Say, well, if you really want that to happen, you really do need to memorialize it, because you thinking it and wanting it is not enough.
Right.
There's a commercial on TV for online, it's called Trust and Will. You may have seen it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of it because I've seen the product and it tries to be accurate in all 50 states, and those things are not.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the commercial hits the nail on the head. There's these two guys working on the engine, the hood up, and they're working on the truck, right? It's father and son.
Yeah.
So father's, I forget what he says, but he says something like, he looks around, he says, I want all this to be yours. When something happens to your mother and I want you to have all this. He goes, gee, thanks, Dad. And this actor comes out of under the truck on a creeper.
Yeah.
and what he says is, not good enough. He says, you can't just say it, you got to put it in writing. Okay, so now, that is accurate concept.
That's an accurate statement.
So if you have something you want to have happen,
yes,
and you bridge that barrier and you're talking about it, now you need to encourage them to memorialize it. Memorialize it, I'm saying, put it down in writing in an enforceable instrument.
Yes.
Those instruments are one of the 3 wills we can do, or at least one of the 2 that really work.
Right.
The regular will or the holographic will, or a trust. Now those things have language in there. It can be as specific and as general as you want, how you want your stuff divided.
Right.
And now those are enforceable instruments. If you're in court and probate court, the probate court will divide it the way the will says. And so will a trust. It just won't be in probate court. It's just as powerful an instrument, just as legal, and the duty of the successor trustee is the same as the executor of a will. They have to do what that says.
Right.
And now, another thing that helps with that is you always have somebody that will, you get your beneficiaries. Let's say you got 3 or 4 beneficiaries. There's always going to be one beneficiary that says, well, I don't think this person should get a 4th like the rest of us. Because, they didn't do anything for mom and dad. They didn't help them. They didn't even send them a Christmas card in the last 10 years,
Right.
But
Yeah.
now you have somebody wanting to substitute their judgment for mom and dad.
Right.
Because they don't agree with what was written in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now,
Yeah.
maybe the time to talk about that would have been before they passed away. But that causes hard feelings because now that person's going to get what mom and dad wanted them to get, even though, and now some of them don't agree with what that should be. So I really suggest if you're a beneficiary, just back off as far as voicing what you think it ought to be.
Yeah.
It's your mom and dad's stuff. And if they come to me and want to put a plan, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to say, look, what's important to me is what you want. Now, if what you want is what the kids want, that's great. But if it's not what the kids want, what's important to me, drafting this trust plan for you, is what you want.
Yeah.
And if this is what you want and you think it's going to be an issue, tell me and I'll make it tighter than a tick. We'll make it strong, enforceable, and that's what you'll get. If that's really what you want to have happen, I'll make sure that that's what happens. Now, it may tick somebody off, make them mad, but usually when you make somebody mad with an inheritance, you're actually doing them a favor.
Yeah.
Like you got a spendthrift.
Yeah.
And they just love to spend money. You can't hang on to money. So you give it to them in a way where they can't do that. They can spend it, they just can't blow it, right? Well, it'll make them mad. But in reality, in the long run, They're gonna thank you someday for that. I can tell stories about that. They will thank you someday for protecting them from themselves. And so you're doing them a favor, even though they're not happy
Right.
about it. And especially the stuff we talked about today, the divorcing or the drug addictions or the creditors lawsuit proofing. I mean, they will sing your praises when the day comes that inheritance is protected because of the
Right.
way you left it to them.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
But, and I mean, Miss Peggy's question was, she went into a lot, but if, you know, if the end question was, you know, talk about if you get older, I mean, I'm not sure where the 50-year-old comes in, maybe Charlotte brought that
I
up.
think Charlotte might have mentioned that.
But I mean, I think it's more like you're 50 years old and parents are getting pretty old. You're getting close to the time where
Right.
it needs to be talked about now, or we're not going to get a chance to talk about it.
And you addressed it, but part of her comment too was
Oh, the legal
when they're
thing.
confusing signals, I guess, between, and it's a communication problem.
Sure.
I think that's what she's talking about. She's calling back. Hey, Peggy.
Hey, I want to clarify, we didn't have any issues over the will or how it worked out, but in a 2-year, you end up, if you're not careful, with the elderly taking care of the elderly. And the time to start, in my opinion, based on my experience, with our situation, with everything going overall relatively well, is that they're more logical when they're younger to talk to you, because Mother was already in her 70s when Daddy died, because he's a lot older than her. And so the point I'm making is I just accepted everything was okay, and my brother took care of a lot of things, but he had, well, the reason I'm throwing this out is a little bit personal, as people know this, but in a 8-year period, he lost every male in the family. His father-in-law died, his dad died, one of his sisters had a death of a husband and another one a divorce. Mainly girls in the family. I don't know how many powers of attorney, even mine, he was over. So what I'm saying is this is like middle 40s. People, in my opinion, at 45 need to start thinking about things like this, because in a 10-year period, you can be hit with major issues, and it's confusing for everybody.
Yeah.
And Mother,
Okay.
we started at a lot younger age. She wanted my brother to, which was fine, because he was. But what happened was, logistically, with family issues, I was the best one to be in charge. Does that make sense?
I understand.
And so to review it with your brothers and sisters, and the way I appreciate my daddy so much is when they changed their will, he didn't do this with my husband. My husband was an outlaw, in-law. I'm sorry, he was an in-law. He really liked my husband. But he asked me to go with him to the grocery store because he wanted to, and I thought it was strange at the time that he wanted to tell me about a change in the will. He had already discussed it with the others. And that was my point about in-laws and parents. You know, this is a big issue with the man and his family and the woman and her family. Not necessarily the in-laws are involved, and sometimes that's the reason some people, I don't think that's an issue with our family, but I think that's an issue with a lot of families. They don't want the in-laws to know. Just throw that out.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think it's just communicating. I think her point was they should have communicated more about what was really wanted and didn't happen.
I think so too, and I would go a step further and say, at any age, you know, she said mid-40s and stuff.
Yeah.
I think at any age is time to discuss, especially those power of attorneys. I've talked about them many times.
Oh, yeah.
It's never too early to do it. Now, you can change those as time comes, and
Right.
when you change a power of attorney, the only thing you're really changing is who you're naming as the agent, because people may come and go and not be in a good position to be your primary agent anymore.
Right.
But any age, I have very young people that things happen, accidents, and now they can't make decisions for themselves. So, but as you get older in your 40s and 50s, I mean, the family's starting to become established now. It's because when you're
Right.
young, things are changing all the time. You're always moving to a new house, you're getting new jobs, you're going back and forth, stuff like that. Things start to
Right.
level out a little bit later on in life, and, you know, as you approach your retirement years. But I agree 100%. I don't know that I would put an age on it and say wait till your mid-40s to deal with it.
Yeah.
You should deal with it now. And I don't say that just because that's what I do. I deal with it because I've seen,
Yeah.
I recommend it because I've seen so many situations that have turned out poorly because of inaction.
Yeah, and I would say
Or
too,
miscommunication.
and I think you'd probably agree that periodically you may want to review what you've done
Yeah.
with your family and all that kind of stuff. It's probably a good idea.
Now, there was a comment about something that found out that later on that the person had changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
Now, you can do that. You can change things, but you might, later in life, you want to make sure the person has the capacity to make those changes, because I hear a story about some people make changes and they're either being influenced by somebody, or they're just not, they're in cognitive decline and they're just not thinking right. You can't change it unless you're of sound mind. And so you got to make sure that that's the case, or the attorney should. I've read some cases where it's, my brother, when nobody was looking, carried mom down to this attorney's office and he signed something. Well, shame on that attorney if they didn't look into the cognitive ability of that person before they signed it. Because I do that quite a bit. I can do a test. If I get any signals whatsoever, or I'm told there's been diagnosis of onset of dementia, you're not signing anything in my office until I conduct an evaluation that I'm allowed to conduct as an attorney.
Yeah.
And rely on its results. And if you're considered cognitively impaired by that test, then my response is, I'm sorry, you can't sign any of these documents. You're not of sound enough mind.
Yeah.
If you want to go and get, now that's not the end be all medical diagnosis. If you want to go to the medical people and get an opinion from them that says, I've examined her thoroughly, and in my opinion, she can sign, then we'll sign them. I'm not the doctor. I can make a determination by administering a medical industry exam. If I administer it the way the instructions say to administer it, and I score it the way the instructions tell me to score it, if I do so, I can rely on its results. Yeah. I'm not the doctor. I don't make the capacity call.
Right.
But I have to have something to guide me through it.
Yeah.
And so, as being somebody on the front lines of running into it in the first place, that's what I go by. Now, that doesn't mean that would stick forever, either way. But if I say, no, I'm not satisfied, you can sign these documents, and they get a doctor's opinion that says, yeah, we can't, then I will, because he knows more, and he's making the call that it is okay. I can only do what I can do as an attorney in the medical field.
I can imagine that may have happened to you in your course of life.
Oh, yeah.
When something comes along and it kind of seems suspicious that this is being changed and all that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, many times. And we have to look into that, and then, we have, when things get challenged, it's usually under undue influence or duress, which means the person's doing something or changing something when they wouldn't normally have done it, but for the influence of another.
Right.
And that's not your sound mind. It's tainted by that influence.
Yeah.
And if you're a susceptible person, let's say elderly, and the person's taking care of you, and they say, well, I'm going to give you your medication until you do this. Or I'm not going to let you go to Walmart anymore until you do this. I mean, you're holding you're influencing these people, and they're making decisions not based on what they want, of sound mind. They're making them under the circumstances that somebody's creating for them, which are so that's a whole other issue, but I agree entirely with what she says. Communication would be very, very helpful.
Very helpful.
So we're getting kind of close.
We are.
I want to go over my seminar coming up. It's a little bit out.
Yes.
It's a ways out. It's May the 17th, and that's a Saturday. And we're going to have that here, WLX, in the back at what you call the Country Cafe. And that is not a place to stay after the seminar and order lunch.
No, but it is a comfortable place.
It is.
And a good spot for you, and plenty of room.
Great venue, plenty of room. We got tables, chairs. You can be real comfortable there. Although there are light refreshments there.
Yeah.
But if you want to come to those Saturday seminars are at 10 o'clock in the morning. We call them Will's Trust in the Nursing Home.
Very good.
And we will go over that. So as we have further Friday bulletproof estate planning here on Friday morning from 8 to 9. I will bring that up between now and that next seminar.
That's right.
And if you want to know when the next one is after that, it's on my website. I think we're struggling with a venue or two for availability, but on some of the later ones, but they usually end up on the calendar for the rest of the year.
And that website is
EstatePlanStand.com. It's easy to get to. And, if you want to talk to me about any of this stuff or anything else that we talk about on the show, not just what we talked about today, give me a call to Pierchoski Estate Law or Pierchoski Elder Law. Give me a call at 931-363-7222 and schedule a call and we'll discuss it. Or you can go to my website and you can send me a question by email. It's Pierchoski Estate, or it's Stan at PierchoskiEstatelaw.com, but you'll find it on my website if you just go to EstatePlanStan.com.
Absolutely.
And you can send it by email, and I'll answer it that way. So, if you have, I offer the response to questions freely.
Yes.
It's no big deal. I know people are trying to learn this stuff, and the only thing they really have available to them is the internet, which is not the best teacher sometimes, or talking to other people. So if some people misunderstand it, they're going to spread the misunderstanding because they don't know any better. But I'll be glad to try and straighten it out if I can. So,
Very good. Another bulletproof estate planning in the books.
that's right. And we're here every Friday
Friday.
from 8 to 9 for Bulletproof State. And it's that call-in show, so if you want to get ready for next week and formulate a question, by all means, do so.
See you next time.
Okay,
Whatever classified stuff they have going on in space.
I'm sorry, I was going by that clock, and it still has a full minute to go. I didn't mean to cut any news, Jeff.
Don't worry about it. It's
Give me
all-
some kind